reading from Paul's letter to the church in Ephesus, found in Ephesians chapter 5, verses 15 through 20. This is not one of the most popular books in the Bible, especially because Paul talks about wives obeying husbands and slaves obeying masters. There's a lot of stuff in this book, this letter, that is really tough to hear. I'm not going to read that part. But he does redeem himself with this one passage I would like to share with you. Except perhaps about the drunkenness. Be careful then how you live, not as unwise people, but as wise, making the most of the time because the days are evil. So do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. Do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit as you sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs among yourselves, singing and making melody to the Lord in your hearts, giving thanks to God, the Father of all times, and for everything in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Here ends the reading. First, I want to thank Eric and Greg for inviting me to this with so little foreknowledge of who I am and what I can say and what I can't say. And that's really the test of a friendship. That really is a test of a friendship. And this is wonderful to be here and to share in their fellowship and beautiful home and their lovely life here in Chatham. Used to have a house on Cape Cod in Marston's Mill, so I'm a little familiar. But we never ventured down this far on the Cape. We heard that they circled the wagons that night out here. But it is great to be here and appreciate it. And I want to especially thank Eric for singing today. I invited him to do that knowing the title of the sermon, thinking, well, of course, if we're going to talk about singing, we've got to have Eric sing. And so I said to him, the name of the song is How Can I Keep From Singing? And Eric's response was, just say no. I told him that was next week's sermon. Indeed, it's a great honor to be with you in worship today for at least two reasons. First, we share a common history, although mine is a little more direct, perhaps, than yours. The Unitarian Church has its beginnings Hungarian roots. I didn't know if you knew that. The Hungarian king, John Sigmund, in the late 1500s, became the first and only Unitarian monarch. My roots are also Hungarian. Both my parents were from Hungary, and I grew up in a Hungarian-speaking household. I hope I am not stretching this too far, but it gives me great pleasure to be with some of my Hungarian relations today. The warm welcome I have received by virtue of this invitation to preach in the graciousness of your minister Edmund has given me a sense that we are indeed all brothers and sisters in some wonderful, wonderful way. And I want to thank you all for bringing me out of preaching retirement this year. This summer I am celebrating 40 years of ordained ministry. Incredible how 40 years can fly. I can remember my ordination Sunday in that little Hungarian church in Fairfield, Connecticut, surrounded by colleagues and relatives and friends. I had no idea where this calling would take me, but I knew that it was what I was meant to do. Perhaps the greatest gift I have received in all these years of ordination is the opportunity to be with wonderful people like yourselves in so many great and meaningful ways. Before I say anything else, and if you hear nothing else this morning, please hear this. I give thanks to God for the privilege of sharing this worship time with you in this 40th year of my ordination. I have heard from Greg and Eric what an open and loving congregation you are, and it is a blessing for me to experience this firsthand. Your commitment to inclusivity in a world that seeks at every opportunity to divide and to demean is an important witness. Your willingness to struggle with difficult questions and affirm that truth can be found in dialogue and discernment is truly the way of love. The community you have built here is more than just some folks who kind of know each other. But I can tell it's real, it's deep, it's true. So I want to take a little leap with you in this sermon time today. I feel like I can trust your openness enough to share with you two things about myself. The first is a secret, and the second is a confession. First, the secret. I love to sing. Now that may not be a secret by now, if you've heard me already this morning. Some of you have already noticed my vocal exuberance, which I like to call singing. I really don't enjoy singing alone, though. And the part of worship that often touches me is the singing part. As long as we are being personal here and taking risks, let me say I have a hunch that many of you enjoy singing as well. I heard you. To join our voices together in song is a grace-filled experience. So I want to talk with you a little bit more about singing this morning. It seems like something that is almost taken for granted in the church, if not in our lives, but it's something very important to the life of a church. The writer Theodore Collier once observed, "The best days of the church have always been its singing days." Certainly the Apostle Paul agreed with that. In the reading we heard this morning, Paul is encouraging the church in Ephesus to be filled with the Spirit, addressing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody to the Lord with all your heart. Now it's easy to miss that in Paul's letter. He often says so much in all those letters to those fledgling congregations that one can easily miss the importance of Paul's admonition to sing with all your heart. I had overlooked that passage for years. It really didn't seem that important to me with all the other stuff about salvation and redemption and everything else Paul says. But sometime early on in my ministry, I discovered how important singing really is. It was while I was attending a church conference on Lake Winnipesaukee, New Hampshire, during the last week of July, many years ago. The conference was an annual event to help clergy and lay people learn more about stewardship and the mission of the church. And there were workshops and speakers and a great opportunity to meet folk from all walks of life, from all places in the country who share a common faith. But perhaps the high point of the week was when all 250 of us would cram into this old, dilapidated wooden chapel for worship. It was there that I discovered singing. I mean, really singing. I'd forgotten how good it felt to sing. To really sing. To sing with abandon, with voices loud and diverse, to sing with conviction and purpose. To let it all hang out, as they used to say. It was like finding an old friend in a place you least expected to find a friend. Someone who had meant a great deal to you, but something over the years had separated you. And discovering the old friend, you remember who you really are. Not how far you've come or how far you've gone, but who you are really inside. Leonard Bernstein once said, "The value of a musical work does not lie in its physical structure, but in the effect it has on us." Humanity's progressive development of musical forms is a spiritual unfolding of the inner self. A spiritual unfolding of the inner self. Singing with those friends and strangers in the old wooden chapel was like finding a way to my inner self. And perhaps that is one of the reasons why Paul encouraged the church to sing. Whenever we sing, there is always the chance that what we may discover is a part of ourselves we have perhaps forgotten, or a part of ourselves that really can't be forgotten because it's too much of who we really are. Singing seems to be the only place or time to let it free. Sometimes in the midst of our singing, something comes through. Our heart and our soul connect. And there in our throat is that joy we may have only dreamed of and have known only fleetingly. Or there is a memory of a time and a place that knew more joy. Or perhaps it is a grief that catches in our voice, or maybe the experience is just too mysterious, and we are simply stirred to our core in a way that words, only when they are sung, seem to capture such a wild hope. It can frighten us in its depth and beauty. If we aren't scared to death, then maybe we are scared to life. I choose to believe that in these moments of song, God speaks in us and through us and out of us. And what we hear and what we know is not just the song of one heart or one life, but of life itself and the heart of God. I discovered this singing in that little chapel, and it was as if a door was being opened. For a long time, I hadn't sung with much conviction or spirit, as Paul says. The world had kind of kicked the song out of me, made me doubt whether it was important to sing in the first place. It caused me to forget about singing at all. The world has a way of doing that to all of us from time to time. We grow busy and cynical, and the song in our heart becomes a whisper rather than an aria. And yet God, who blew the breath of life in each of us, stirs us again and gives us voice to our soul. And it is at these times that it's important to sing with others. Paul knew the importance of singing in the building of community. When Paul wrote his letter to the church at Ephesus, he was worried about their lack of community. He knew that such a new church and such a hostile area would soon have the spirit driven from it. Everyone would soon be after their own personal gain, expressing their own opinion. And there would be little charity or conviction to live out a life of greater calling. For this reason, Paul encouraged them to not just to sing, but to sing with each other and to each other. It's as if he is telling them to let the psalms and the hymns and the spiritual songs remind them of who they are and to whom they belong. That's important. During the Second World War, a friend of mine was in a Nazi labor camp. Each day, he and other prisoners would be forced to work on the roads around the camp. With little food and clothing, or subjected to the beatings of the guards, their lives became more and more hopeless, a living hell. What kept them going was trying to recall the words to old hymns and psalms. Without the aid of a Bible, the life of each person became very important, for in the memory of any prisoner might be the verse of Scripture that could be lost if he should die. One day my friend told me he had all but given up hope. The night before he had been beaten by the guards, and now as he stood in the cold, muddy road clinging to a shovel to hold himself up, so sick and injured that each breath came with great pain and effort, he asked himself, why go on? Why endure? His life was worth nothing. Why not lay down and die? At that moment, a fellow prisoner came to him and began to softly sing a hymn. Just a line or two, and then he asked my friend if he could recall the rest. Almost automatically, my friend finished the verse for his fellow prisoner. But the song stayed with him. It became a lifeline. It was the bridge to a greater reality, that the hell he was living was not all there was to life. That even though his life seemed futile and so miserable, even his life belonged to something greater, to God, and in the end was worth a great deal to him. It kept him going. My friends, your song is so, so important. It's the special song that God has given you to sing. And it needs to be sung. And we who share our lives together in this community of faith need to hear it. Maybe you've forgotten the words, or don't know its tune. Maybe then the songs of others here may remind you of your song, of God's love for you. The old hymn that Eric sang this morning that was written years ago when people were getting thrown in jail for their beliefs had those great words. My life flows on in endless song, above earth's lamentations. I hear the real though far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear that music ringing. It echoes in my soul. How can I keep from singing? How can I keep from singing? I found I need to ask myself that question from time to time. It serves as a reminder that I need to keep singing, that there is something of God's beautiful Spirit alive and at work in my life that finds its expression in song. When Jenny Lynn was coming to this country for her first concert tour, she expressed to the captain of the ship bringing her from Europe a desire to see a sunrise at sea. Accordingly, one cloudless morning, he called on her at first dawn. Silent and motionless, she stood on the deck, watching every change of shade and tint in the sky and the reflection on the water until the first golden rays of the sun shot up from the horizon. And as the sun leaped up from the waves, Jenny Lynn burst into rapturous song, her deeply religious feeling finding expression in the music of Handel's Messiah. She seemed oblivious to the gathering onlookers. In the ecstasy of her emotion, she lifted her voice to an unseen hearer to whose majesty and glory she paid her tribute. And she sang, I know that my Redeemer liveth. I'm sure if someone had dared to ask her, I'm sure she would have declared, how can I keep from singing? When I began, I said I wanted to share with you a secret and a confession. You know, the secret is I love to sing. And the confession is that I'm not very good at it. Which is also probably no secret by now. On more than a few occasions, I've been caught singing joyfully and mostly off-key. Somewhere, someone, when I was a child, told me I didn't sing very well, and I believed him. It marked me with a certain insecurity about singing. And because of that lack of confidence, I'm sure my singing has suffered. And I'm sure others have suffered because of it. Perhaps someone has done that to you sometime. And your singing is the morning shower variety kind like mine, and probably should be. But I believe within each of us is the soul of a Caruso, or a Pavarotti, or a Jenny Lynn, or an Eric Riley, if not the talent. Whether we end up on The Voice, or in the shower belling away one of the great Motown hits, God never judges the quality or the quantity of our talent, or rather our willingness to express it. John Wesley, the writer of hymns and champion of congregation singing, once wrote, "Sing not lolling at ease or in the indecent posture of sitting," glad we stood, "drawling out one word after another, but all standing before God and praising God lustily." When was the last time you thought of lustily in church? "And with good courage." Let that be our conviction as well, shall we? Let us, as Paul encourages us to do, make melody to the Lord with all our hearts. God knows this screwy, crazy world needs to hear our song as much as we need to sing it. So sing, my brothers and sisters, sing. And if anyone asks you what you're doing, you can just say, how can I keep from singing?
Now let there be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is sacred to so many of us, a community of memory and of hope, for we are now the keepers of the dream.
Strange. Yeah, I agree. But when I was knowing that Eric had a great career on Broadway, I kept thinking of these political times we have. Auntie Mae We need a little Christmas. Remember that song? Yeah, we need a little Christmas right this very minute. And every time at Christmas, people always say, I just wish it could last all year long. Well, let's try. Let's see what it feels like to sing Joy to the World on a hot day in August, shall we?
2:45.